Hello, everyone. I want to do a brief video on research methods, and that's going to be today's lesson. And in this video, I'm going to break down research in hopefully a clear, simple way, especially for anyone who feels nervous and overwhelmed or brand new to research. So it's going to be a brief synopsis. It's not going to encompass everything, but it's going to be a brief synopsis and probably help you focus in on things for your understanding. Okay. So today, um, I would like to cover a few things. First of all, what is research? Then I want to talk about qualitative and quantitative research, the differences. And then I'm going to briefly talk about hopefully research designs, what is sampling, um, break down briefly validity and reliability and ethics, and some of the basic statistical measurements such as mean, median, and mode, standard deviation. Um, Try to briefly explain percentiles, Stanines, t-test, and ANOVA. Okay. And like I said, I'm going to try to make it as simple and practical as possible. But this does not substitute for actually, a full-fledged study if you're going to take comps. And it does not substitute for your class research methods, but it kind of gives you kind of a brief, kind of like quick clip note version. Okay. That's what my purpose is. So let's start off with answering the question, what is research? Research is basically a systemic way of asking and answering questions. Instead of guessing or relying on opinion, research gives us evidence based on data. So when it comes to counseling, research helps us know basically like what treatments actually work best. Understanding behavior and mental health. It can protect client from ineffective or harmful practices. And it can improve programs in agencies and in schools. Okay. So now there's two basic main types of research. Okay. There's quantitative research, which I'm going to talk about now. And quantitative research uses things like numbers, statistics, and measurements. Okay. An example of that is like what percentage of students report anxiety? Or does CBT decrease depression symptoms? Or is this new school program effective? This type often uses surveys, tests, or even numerical data. Okay. When it comes to qualitative research focus on words, stories, meanings, and lived experiences. Okay. Um, like a few quick examples of that is like, what is it like for Black men to seek therapy? How do students experience bullying? Or something like, what challenges do first generation college students face? In qualitative research, you use interviews, open ended questions, journals, or even observations. Okay. There's a third type, and that's called mixed method. And mixed method uses both numbers and personal stories to get a fuller picture. So mixed method use qualitative and quantitative designs. Okay. Um, Major research designs are things like experimental. And in experimental, the researcher controls variables and can show cause and effect. Quasi-experimental is more similar to experiment, but without the random assignment. Okay. Correlation looks at relationship between variables. Descriptive describes what is happening without manipulating anything. And qualitative designs are interviews, focus groups, observations, or case studies. Okay. When we're doing research, a lot of times you hear people say sampling. So sampling is a sample of the group of people you collect data from. A population is the larger group you want to understand. So good samples are representative, they're fair, and they're large enough to be meaningful. Okay. When it comes to validity and reliability, okay, let me see how I explain this. The best way to explain validity is this. Validity is that the study measure what it claims to measure. And when it comes to reliability, the measurement is consistent over time. Okay. Um, Now, I said we're going to talk about some basic statistics and try to make it as simple as possible. So now let's talk about some key statistics used in research. And hopefully these will help us make sense of the data and it'll help you get a clearer understanding of some things that you might have forgot. There's a thing called measures of central tendencies. And these tell us what is typical in a set of numbers. Okay. And there are three major factors in this. There's the mean, and the mean is the average. Okay. If, let's say, a test scores are 80, 90, and 100, what you do is you add all three, you add 80 plus 90 plus 100, and then you're divided by the total number, which is three, and that'll come out to 90. So the mean will be the 90. Okay. A median, the median is the middle score when the scores are arranged in order. So if I use 70, 80, and 100, and I put them in order from lowest to highest, you have 70, 80, and then 100. The median would be 80 because it's the middle score. Okay. If there's an even number of scores, we take the average of the two middle scores. Okay. Mode. The mode is the most common score. So we had scores like 5, 7, 7, 8, and 10. The mode will be 7 because 7 appears the most. Okay. Why these matter in counseling? If you run a program and the mean depression score goes down, your treatment might be effective. If the mode of anxiety score is high, most students are struggling. Okay. And that's what you want to remember how that matters in counseling. Measures of the spread, like standard deviation. Standard deviation show how spread out scores are. So a small deviation, the scores are closer together. A larger standard deviation, scores are more spread out. An example of this is like if most students score between 95 and 100, scores are similar, okay, because 95 and 100. So it'll be a small standard deviation. If the scores range from 40 to 100, scores are more different, so it'll be a larger standard deviation. So when it comes to research, standard deviation helps us understand how consistent or varied the results are. Okay. Percentages or percentiles. Percentiles rank someone's performance compared to others. An example of this is a child who scores in the 80th percentile scored higher than 80% of other children. So counselors use percentiles in IQ tests, achievement tests, admissions assessment, and most standardized tests. Okay. STAT9 stand for standard 9. Scores are grouped in 9 bands. 1 very low, 9 very high, and 5 average or medium. Okay. These make scores easier to interpret. Okay, so example this would be like a student with a STAT9 of 8 perform much better than average. A STAT9 of 5 means that they scored the average performance. So school counselors often use STAT9s on standardized scored reports. Okay. Inferential statistics is test differences. Sometimes we want to know if groups are statistically different or something happened just by chance. Okay. And there are two common tests. Okay. The first one is the t-test. A t-test compares the average scores of two groups. Okay. Example of this is group A receives CBT and group B receives no treatment. So if group A depression scores are significantly lower, a t-test would tell us if the difference is meaningful or not, and not random. So we'll use a t-test to compare the two groups. Okay. Then there's the thing called an ANOVA, an analysis of variance. ANOVA compares 3 or more groups. So comparing satisfaction level between clients in group therapy, individual therapy, and no therapy, what you'll do is you'll run an ANOVA. So ANOVA tell us, are the groups different overall? Is one therapy more effective than the other? Okay. So putting it all together, a counselor want to see 3 different anger management programs where they help teens. They measure anger scores before and after. They compare the mean scores. They calculate standard deviations to see consistency. They run an ANOVA to compare the 3 groups. If one group shows lower scores, that program might be the best, right? And that's how research is done in real life. When it comes to ethics in research, there's some key things you got to remember. First, informed consent, okay? 2, voluntary participation. 3, no harm to your participants. 4, confidentiality. And 5, and very important, right to stop at any time. The participant has the right to quit anytime. Especially important in counseling because we often work with youth, vulnerable populations, and trauma survivors, okay? Research matters for counseling because research helps us use treatments that work, help us write grants, advocate for policy change, and improve programs. Research makes our ethical, effective, and evidence-based things work. So in closing, thank you for watching this brief video. Hopefully this helps a lot. If you have any questions, or if you need this in a compact study guide, stop by my office and I'll make sure you get it. All right. So thank you and take care.